Hello, my African Americans. So, as you know, I've devoted my life to teaching Tods about God. And I'm not stopping. I'm still fired up on my mission. And I want to talk about the importance of putting God first. And I want to begin with saying how I hated this growing up. I didn't want to be a Christian because I didn't want to put God first. I was working a landscaping job and my bosses were Pentecostal Christians, Assembly of God Christians, and they appreciated that I didn't swear and that I didn't drink or drug, that I lived a pretty clean life, and they wanted to know why I wasn't a Christian, because I was telling them that I was an atheist. And I said, well, if you're a Christian, it means you got to put God first. And I don't want to put God first. I want to put me first. And so that's how I lived my life. And kind of worked in some ways. But it didn't work. It should have worked, right? You put yourself first means you get better results, right? You'd think so, but I guess it just didn't really work, and I collapsed into this 6 years of bedridden chronic fatigue syndrome. And during that time, I had a spiritual crisis. Like, my way of doing things didn't work. So I thought, I got to do things differently. And I discovered Dennis Prager on the radio and discovered Judaism. I was like, okay, I'm going to put God first. And I got all fired up about Judaism. But somehow, the way my mind worked, the way my body worked, practicing Judaism just wasn't sufficient for me because I was just so messed up or had so many different emotional addictions. Still getting fired from jobs and still alienating people needlessly. And so I got into 12-step work, and this is where the miracle happened. So I always hated that idea of putting God first until my life collapsed, and then I accepted that this was true and correct, and the only way for me to live my life. But when I tried to implement organized religion, and I made this religious commitment to putting God first, that just didn't cut it. I mean, because I had tasted a lot of different women, and so I was off to the races with the ladies, and so I couldn't confine my self-expression fully within the rubric of Orthodox Judaism. So it's just out of control with my social life. And in jobs, like I remember I walked into this temp job circa 1996, and I guess I was going to be doing a lot of typing, so I was going to be sitting next to this reasonably attractive woman, and she got down under my desk and she plugged in my dictation machine, and I said something about the great way that she plugged in my dictation machine and how it looked like she was really good at taking dictation. And I got fired. Boom. I was on the job like 15 minutes. I'd signed all these forms, I think about sexual harassment, etc. I say one remark to the secretary about how she looked like she could really take dictation. And she didn't mind. She didn't object. But the manager walking by, boom, he just fired me. Like right there. And I got paid bupkis. Nothing. Okay, I came in, I put on a suit and tie, got fired within a few minutes of showing up. I got fired from other temp jobs. I had this problem at work. I used to surf inappropriate material in the workplace. And that would it'd either get me fired or they'd keep me, but then they'd complain about me to the temp service. Or I worked at William Morris. I was an assistant to Ben Silverman, NBC executive, and I was talking to his assistant in London, and I ended up sending her via email to her personal email a chapter of my forthcoming book, A History of X. And somehow he had access to her personal email, and he tried to print out the chapter of my book, and it jammed his computer, and he got angry, and he called the temp service, and he read them the riot act, and they fired me. And then other places, they just saw I had no interest in doing the job, so they would fire me. Then other places, I'd lend out, or I'd show around copies of my cinematic masterpiece, which I directed in January of 1996, What Women Want. And that didn't lead to any good result. Like, the decent women that I showed it to supposedly never looked at it. They were like too frightened to look at it. And then like other people would then complain to my boss, and I'd get fired again, just for like sharing some of the cinema verite that I directed. And I got kicked out of 3 different acting schools. Once I think I told the teacher to F off. Another time the teacher caught me in a compromising situation in his library. I was supposed to be rehearsing this scene, and I'd taken the scene a little too far, and we weren't exactly fully clothed when the teacher walked in, so I got kicked out of that acting program. And then there was another one. I went to this improv program in the Valley, and they complained that I only made jokes about religion and sex. That's all I could make jokes about. And they suggested I was better suited for solo endeavors, perhaps stand-up comedy. So my life was just like lurching from crisis to crisis, and that's what my longtime therapist remembered. The first few years of therapy with me, it was just like crisis to crisis. It was just crisis management. So I got into 12-step, and I discovered something amazing. When I went to work and I put my boss's interests first, all these problems that had been tripping me up for years and years and years completely disappeared. Okay, and I didn't even have to fight them. Didn't have to struggle with them. I didn't have to squelch them. I didn't have to tap them down. Didn't have to do battle with them. I didn't have to compromise with them. They just disappeared. If I put my boss's interests first, I wasn't going to speak inappropriately in the workplace. If I put my boss's interests first, if I came to work with the attitude of being of service to my employer, I wasn't going to surf inappropriate material on the web. If I put my boss's interests first, I wasn't going to use my computer in an unprofessional, embarrassing, awkward way. If I put my boss's interests first, I wasn't going to share some of my cinema verite. If I put my boss's interests first, I wasn't going to, say, inappropriate things to the women in the workplace. And I didn't have to struggle to control myself around clients or co-workers, or like all those problems went away. I didn't have to struggle to do my job. It's like, okay, let me just put my boss first. What does God want from me right now? I'm at work. God wants me to be of service to my employer and to accept that I'm just a worker among workers. And my life just got so much easier, because when I put God first, when I was at the workplace, all those other things that would trip me up just disappeared. Now I'd have to remind myself like every hour or two, okay, Why am I here? I'm here to be of service to my employer. I'm here to help God's kids. That's my attitude in the workplace, to help other people, to be of service to my employer. Ask myself, what does my employer want me to do right now? And all those problems just went away. And when I had Alexander Technique clients, I've never once, to the best of my knowledge, said anything inappropriate to any of my Alexander Technique clients. There's never been any awkward, inappropriate interaction. I've worked with a lot of beautiful women as my Alexander Technique clients, and I've never asked any of them out. I've never crossed boundaries. There's never been this awkward pause or creepy moment. When I teach the Alexander Technique, I just go into this zone here to teach certain principles of the Alexander Technique, and I leave all my religious opinions and political opinions and social opinions and cultural opinions and personal opinions. I just leave them aside, just get into the zone. I'm here to be of service to the client. They're paying $100 for a 45-minute session, so I just try to bundle as many insights into how we work as a physiological organism, how we can move most gracefully, operate most efficiently. And all I try to do is hand over these essential principles of the Alexander Technique. And it's not about me. It's not about me showing, I've got these amazing hands. I can take away your pain. I can take away your unnecessary muscular tension. I can do all these amazing things when I just put my hands on the neck or on the shoulders, or find any muscular holding patterns in the back or the hips. Or it's not about showing off. It's not about me. It's just about conveying principles of a technique which has been highly effective, particularly for people in chronic pain and for people in performing arts, for 100 years. So I go into the Alexander Technique lesson, and I just want to transmit those essential principles of the technique. All my other foibles just fall away for that lesson. They're just gone, and I'm not even struggling. I'm not even holding myself at bay. It's I better not say anything inappropriate about politics or religion to this client. Just doesn't even come up. Now, in other workplaces over the past few years, I have made mistakes. At times, I've spoken unnecessarily about politics, being unnecessarily provocative, gotten into trouble, and when other people have retaliated, I resent it, and I resent them, and then I ask myself, why do I have this resentment? Why do I resent them? What did they do? What part of my life did it affect? And what role did I play? And then it comes back to, I got out of the zone of being of service. So I've never touched drugs or alcohol, so I don't know firsthand what it's like to be a drug addict or an alcoholic, but someone with numerous emotional addictions, it just makes sense to me that if you put God first, take the third step prayer seriously. God, I offer myself to thee to be with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, a victory over them. May bear witness to those I would help of thy love, thy power, and thy way of life. May I do your will always. If you go into your work day with that attitude, you're not likely to get into trouble with other people. If you go into social gathering with that attitude, you're not likely to get into trouble with other people. If you go into a date with that attitude, you're not likely to get into trouble. If you go into a meeting with someone who hates you, you're much less likely to get into trouble. If you go to synagogue with that attitude, you're much less likely to get into trouble with other people. And I notice when I read novels, watch TV, watch movies, 90% of the time, it seems like the protagonists get into trouble and usually reveal a fatal flaw because they have no higher purpose beyond satisfying their basic instincts. They're satisfying their instincts for power, for money, for sex, for fame, for honor. And there's no transcendent purpose to their life. If they only had like some avenue of transcendence, they wouldn't get into trouble. But because they're just following their basic instincts and there's no transcendent moral system, transcendent purpose, no spirituality, no religion making demands on them, for a lot of us, when we just follow our instincts about what comes naturally, we just get into so much trouble. We can just really get into rescuing other people, like getting all obsessed with helping the neighbor's kid who's already had a few criminal arrests and maybe 1 or 2 convictions, but we're gonna save this kid. Or we can get obsessed with saving our romantic partner who's got a 520 credit score, but we're gonna fix her. Or we can just obsessed with the rescue's gonna come along for us and take care of our problems so that we don't have to do the hard work of spiritual renewal. But when you put God first, all these problems disappear. I never wanted to put God first, but in the end I had to, or die.